I worked with an organization called Kenya Social Ventures, and this organization deals with grassroots efforts that mainly involve empowerment, leadership, development, and sustainability within like informal settlements. So they mainly partner with organizations or other smaller groups in slums. So I was working primarily in Kibera, and one of the partner organizations was the Power Women's Group. And this is a group of women who are all HIV positive, and they've come to accept their status. And from that, they banded together and all invested in a business, which was craft making and industry, so as to provide for themselves and to sustain themselves as an organization. And what the video didn't tell you, but in one of the images was these two pictures. It was this picture of two ornaments. It was earrings. And the thing about these women that was quite remarkable for me was how quick and eager they were to learn. And those two earrings, one was from Italy and one they happened to make in front of me. And that should just show you the kind of people they were. But that's an entirely different thing, and you can read about that in my story. But for the presentation, I wanted to talk about something, an experience that really outreached me over the summer, which was a slum tour that I happened to have witnessed. I knew about slum tours, like I'd read about them, but it was such a foreign idea to me until I was walking through the slums with my team and also a member from the Power Women's Group, the head of the Power Women's Group, and we saw this van like dodge like the pathways within the slums are very narrow. So the van was taking up basically the entire pathway, and it was forcing people to squeeze along the different like setups and shacks around the pathway, the road. And basically the people within the vans were probably tourists and basically families, and this was their way of experiencing the slums of Kibera. And I remember thinking to myself that it was not too different compared to a safari. And this is how people were viewing essentially my people. And I was very, very frustrated about it. And I remember writing to the cohort about this, about how people within the slums were being portrayed. Because essentially, at the end of the day, these people who are in this van never got to experience Kibera, experience the slums. They never got to, like for instance, walk along the narrow, muddy, littered pathways. They never got to dodge between different domestic wildlife and on the streets. They never got to haggle with street vendors. They never got to take in the rather pungent smell that accompanies a slum. All they got to see there were different vendors, and there were children on the street, and some had tattered clothes, and there were chicken running free, and this is what they saw, and this is what they took pictures of. And probably this is what they brought back to their countries, whichever countries they were from. And so over the course of the semester, what I've been dealing with is identity and the role my identity plays in different situations. And in this case, I was thinking about how these people within the slums were being misrepresented by these pictures, by these slum tours, and how as we go out into these different communities, how easy it is for us to misrepresent them as well. Because we're going in with a kind of bias, with a kind of privilege, as Hannah mentioned earlier. And so I really wanted to highlight and talk about the slum tour, and as it relates to the people within the slums. I was walking, as I mentioned, with one of the women from the Power Women's Group, and she was called Akinyi, and you never have guessed that she was over 40 years old, and she had 17 children, not all her own, but a lot of these women within the Power Women's Group, they used to take in other people's children who are orphaned by AIDS as well. And you would never have guessed just how passionate she was for children, for life, for her community. She was also a community-based healthcare provider. She'd go within the slums teaching them about safe sexual practices and how to conduct themselves in a manner. And she actually had this saying that true love is when you know the health status of your partner. So basically, what she witnessed, and I was embarrassed because I was in her company when we saw this, and she told me she was actually quite used to it. But what she left me with was, if you don't like what you're seeing, then do something about it. But if you say you can't do anything, then don't complain. And for me, I was kind of just like, oh. I didn't know what I could do at that point. I understood the purpose of the slum tours. I understood not everyone was going in to try and misrepresent the community. Not everyone, that wasn't their intention. They genuinely wanted to know how life was. And this would be a safe kind of option. I understood the kind of revenue it brings in for different organizations. But I didn't know how to change that or how to make a difference about that. But what I can say is, I feel that through the experience, I learned how to kind of move away from the bias, step back from the bias, and try and think of how I'm really capturing situations, capturing the community that I'm writing about, how I'm representing them, not just in my writing, but in my pictures and in everything that I do, even in this talk. Just to be sure that I'm not misrepresenting a community that's already vulnerable. Since we all sit from a place of privilege, we need to be conscious of that.